If you've been alive for longer than 25 years, you've seen the manufacturing base in the United States essentially collapse. And in fact, the only manufacturing industries here in the United States that have actually grown and added factories in the past 20 years are beverage and tobacco, food, and chemicals. And there's not a whole lot of them either. So it's not an exaggeration to say that we've wholly outsourced and offshored our manufacturing base in favor of finance, technology, and services. But is the decline of US manufacturing about to take a sudden and swift shift towards the positive? And are we about to experience a manufacturing boom? Well, in this video, I want to break down some of the data and give you my opinion. Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian, and I'm a corporate recruiter, and I've made it my mission to demystify how corporations hire, and as a broader sense, how to have a successful career. So if that kind of content interests you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You may also want to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any future content. And if you're tired of employers holding all the cards in the employment arrangement, and you're ready to reclaim control yourself, head over to my website because I've created a free webinar where I teach you exactly how to do that. So I spent a good chunk of my career working in the manufacturing segment. So this is actually very near and dear to my heart. And I too have experienced companies shutting down and moving production overseas to try to save a buck. And as a result, unfortunately, it's cost millions of people their careers. And it's forced people to pivot and shift out of manufacturing into other industries. Now, obviously, if you have a STEM background or you're somebody that's coming through an engineering program right now and you're getting ready to graduate, it's probably not the news you want to hear, but there might be some good news coming down the pipeline with regard to manufacturing in the United States, and it potentially could be coming back. So I want to look at some of the data and break it down for you. And then let's discuss what exactly is happening in the market, especially with tariffs and all the things that are going on. There's a whole lot to unpack, so let's jump in. So I think it makes sense to start with the manufacturing segment as a whole and how we got where we are today. So this data is produced by the St. Louis Fed, and it shows us all employees in manufacturing by the thousands. And this goes all the way back to 1940. And you can see in the beginning of this chart, 1939, manufacturing was not a big deal in the United States. And obviously there was a major event that happened in the 1930s and 1940s. We all know that's the World War II, which put the United States on the map as far as an economic powerhouse. And in particular, manufacturing was the core. That was the foundation of our economic might.
From 1920 to 1935, around 30 tanks were built in the United States. These were all development or pilot tanks made for experimental purposes. The sudden creation of a vast citizen army and the lessons of warfare in Europe brought a great expansion of tank building capacity.
We can see it reflected in this chart. Manufacturing spiked, and at the peak of the war efforts in 1943, you could see that we were a major manufacturer, probably the biggest manufacturer on the planet. And over time, actually, obviously, as the war ended, manufacturing did dip, but it continued its upward trend over the course of the next few decades. And then what happened in the 1980s? Well, that's when we started to see foreign competition enter the market, in particular with companies like Toyota and Honda bringing what we at the time considered to be cheap alternatives to the market. And they had a reputation of being cheap as well, but they brought a lot of cheaper options into our marketplace.
Our Own a Toyota Today sales event is going on now, and this week we're making deals like there's no tomorrow. Making deals on all our Celicas.
Give me a white Celica liftback.
Deals on all our trucks.
Red four-wheel drive.
Deals on all our Corollas, including Toyota's lowest price car, the Corolla Tercel.
Silver Tercel.
You got it. Deals on any Toyota you want.
Blue liftback.
Blue liftback. Oh, what a feeling to own a Toyota today.
A green pickup.
Red Corolla.
And manufacturing did start to suffer. So over the 80s, companies were really struggling with identity, with quality issues, all of these things that really put a dent in the upward mobility or upward trend of manufacturing in the United States. Then we get into the 1990s, and there was another major event that happened in the early 90s. The North American Free Trade Agreement was ratified and signed. What the North American Free Trade Agreement is an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico to try to free up trade barriers to try to combat some of what was going on with these foreign imports, but also to make the North American markets as strong as possible. So they got rid of things like tariffs. And in theory, that was all great, but functionally what ended up happening was a lot of these manufacturers ended up moving their operations south of the border where they had cheaper access to labor. Ironically, though, we didn't necessarily see it reflected in the market. Now, you have to keep in mind at the same time, the American population is growing, and it's grown exponentially since the 1940s. So this chart is still a little bit misleading. However, we still saw manufacturing rise over the next several years into the late 90s. Now, what ended up happening in the late 90s into the early 2000s? Well, we had a major tech bubble. Tech was all the rage at that point in time. This was the first time that the American economy shifted solidly away from manufacturing and into more technology and service and thought leadership. That's basically where things started to kind of decouple from our traditional manufacturing base. Obviously, 9/11 happened as well, and that popped the tech bubble at the same time. And we had a major recessionary event that happened. And obviously, you can see that reflected drastically in the chart. That's where we saw this massive decline over that period of time. But there's also a very interesting thing that happened at the exact same time. Call it opportunistic, call it what you will, but China also entered into the World Trade Organization around this exact same time. And what that meant was now there was even more foreign competition in our factories and cheap labor. And as a result, markets got flooded with cheap Chinese parts and products. At the same time, the United States seemed to be happy with giving away all these jobs.
For more than 40 years, ShopVac, one of the country's most recognizable vacuum brands, called Williamsport home. However, in the next coming months, the company plans to move a large section of its manufacturing plant to China.
ShopVac is in a position where they are going to be reducing their employment size due to the economy right now.
People that have worked there for, 30 years, 30 plus years, and they're not at retirement age yet, but they're to the age to where maybe they're not going to be able to really easily start over.
Julie Keller lives right near the ShopVac warehouse. She says it's sad to see a company that started here slowly make its way out.
I'm a made in the USA type of person, and I think that, everything should stay here and people should buy here.
But what that meant for manufacturing folks is that segment has all but dried up. And it's been a challenge to be in manufacturing over the long haul, especially as there's been continued pressures to try to reduce costs and to try to get cheaper labor. And there's this fight between this pendulum that I talk about frequently on this channel, where pendulum of power swings back and forth from the employee to the employer. And these free trade agreements, the World Trade Organization, China, all of this foreign competition into our markets, the outsourcing of everything, the offshoring of everything, this is all playing a part in companies trying to reduce their bottom lines as best they can so that they can make more money, they can be more profitable. And that's why we're starting to see the cycle of layoffs shorten over. It used to be once you would see, like on this chart, you would see major layoff events. There was one in the 80s, early 80s. There was the next major event happened, I think, in the early 90s. You see this dip right here. But then we started seeing them roughly around once every 10 years. You saw a major layoff event in the early 2000s, corresponding with those two events. Then the subprime, where you can see it again, dipping down here from 2007 to 2009. That corresponds exactly with this black mark here, or this gray area. That's the subprime crisis, where even more companies outsourced and shipped off or offshored their production. And now where it seems like we're heading is these layoff events, while they may not be like quote unquote major layoff events, they are more frequent, and companies are quote unquote right sizing much more frequently in the shape and the form of moving jobs offshore. And we're still very much a service-based economy. But I want to touch back on China real quick before we get to the rest of this video, because this is such an important part of where manufacturing is heading going forward. And I promise you that this is not supposed to be a political motivated video at all. This is just really pointing out what has happened so that we know where we're heading in the future. So China joined the World Trade Organization back in 2001, and it came at an unfair cost to the U.S. economy, because there was a belief that by adding the China into the World Trade Organization, that it would actually help our economy and benefit our agriculture in particular. But clearly, the arrangement hasn't been lived up to on our side for 20 years, and there is a sense of buyer's remorse. Now, what essentially they've done is they've come in and not played by the rules that were supposed to be a part of them joining the World Trade Organization. They've routinely not lived up to agreements. They've stolen IP. They basically copied and flooded the market with cheap knockoffs of products that, I mean, in some cases, my wife knows of bags, like Louis Vuitton bags, that look exactly like the original, but they're obviously cheap alternatives. And in fact, TikTok has been flooded with Chinese manufacturers, if you believe the narrative that they're trying to pitch, that they are basically giving away IP for pennies on the dollar. They are willing to sell you the original brand designs for these major companies, these luxury brands like Lululemon and, Louis Vuitton and all these companies that have massive upcharges on their stuff. And they're saying you can buy the same exact stuff at pennies on the dollar if you go direct to us. It's just not going to have the logo on it. So essentially what they're saying is like, we're ripping you off and we're ripping off these companies that trusted us and all this stuff. So right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm not here to judge that particular aspect of it. But the fact of the matter is that China has not been a good steward of trade across the globe. And this is not just towards the United States. It's towards every country who has outsourced anything to China in order to try to benefit from the cheaper labor. So that from a high level is why there's been such a massive push to implement tariffs, et cetera, to try to make things more fair, at least from the United States' perspective. And this has been something that has been talked about for a long time, and it's been on both sides of the aisle. It's not just the Republicans, it's also been Democrats talking about it. Don't want to necessarily get into the details of that. You can do your own research there. But nonetheless, the manufacturing base has been gutted in no small part to China and China's efforts to undercut the market. Now, what does that mean for us? So obviously there's a lot of tariffs that are happening right now. It's kind of the big talk of the town. And what does that mean for manufacturing? Well, Trump has said that if you build your plants in the United States, you build your products there, that there'll be no tariffs. And so the question is manufacturing going to be returning to the United States? Well, that's the hope with all of these tariffs. And that's the question that's being asked. And in particular with automotive, that's kind of been one of the big high profile ones. What's going to happen with the car industry or the automotive industry? So far, if the leading indicators are correct and the news is correct, which, they're publishing this stuff pretty regularly, it does seem like there is a plan to invest back in the United States' manufacturing base. Now, we look at Stellantis, for example. They are gearing up toward for a multi-billion-dollar investment. And this says that they would likely focus on investing in U.S. operations in the coming future in order to increase its sales volume and market share. In addition to that, we've also seen Hyundai has announced a $21 billion investment in the United States. This is going to be in part for the electric vehicle manufacturing. So major investment by Hyundai. Now, there's a few other companies. I know that Toyota had already planned to implement or build a few new plants and invest more in United States manufacturing. This is before all this tariff talk even happened. We've also seen companies like Novartis in the drug manufacturing pharmaceuticals planning to invest $23 billion in the United States as these tariffs are basically coming online and forcing them to make moves. So they've made a huge commitment to expand and build potentially up to 10 facilities in the United States, creating 4,000 jobs. Obviously, it's going to take time to build these plants. That's over 5 years, but nonetheless, if you're somebody that's in manufacturing, these are a lot of jobs that are coming online, especially if you're in the pharmaceuticals. Now, it's not just pharmaceuticals, it's also in manufacturing of electronics, and Apple probably being the most popular one here, or the most well-known one. They are planning to invest $500 billion in the United States over the next 4 years. And so that's going to be jobs located in Michigan, Texas, California, Arizona, Nevada, Iowa, Oregon, North Carolina, and Washington State. They plan to build a new factory in Texas, doubling their research fund, a manufacturing academy, and investments in AI and silicon engineering. If you're paying close attention, you might want to highlight some of these job types that are going to be in the future. That might be if you're trying to future-proof yourself and you're trying to build a career in manufacturing. Just kind of little keywords here that you might want to start paying a little closer attention to. But nonetheless, Apple is committing $500 billion, and that represents a huge amount of high-paying, very technical jobs. We also have a TSMC, which is in semiconductors. This was announced not too long ago, a $100 billion plan to build 5 new factories in the United States. I'm not sure if they're a Taiwanese company for technology and cell phones and car. We don't build any semiconductors or very little semiconductors here in the United States, which is a strategic problem. You know, when you are not able to build chipsets and everything has chips in them, there's not a single electronic thing from defense contractors all the way through the automobiles. I mean, even your refrigerators and even light bulbs nowadays have smart this and smart that. So not having any semiconductor manufacturing in the United States is a major issue, and one that is trying to be corrected. In this Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company has made a relatively, I mean, a huge investment in building some new plants here. Same thing goes for, I believe, NVIDIA also has announced that they plan to spend hundreds of billions in the next 4 years. Going back to Johnson & Johnson's, we have this another pharmaceutical company that's going to be investing $55 billion over the next 4 years throughout the United States. Those include 4 planned new manufacturing facilities, including a groundbreaking today on a previously announced plant in North Carolina. It's a $2 billion facility, so it's like state-of-the-art manufacturing, cutting-edge manufacturing facility in Wilson, North Carolina. So that's going to add a ton of jobs as well. They're obviously going to be really high-paying. It's not just them, it's also GE Aerospace has announced that they plan to invest about $1 billion in manufacturing this year alone. So you can probably expect to see that increasing, but they are building and investing basically double the amount that they did last year. And ABB, this is a smaller, let's say smaller, but a smaller investment, but they're building a plant for at $120 million to expand in, looks like in Selmer, Tennessee, which will create some jobs, and then in Mississippi, which will create even more jobs. And they have also invested $500 million in the United States. It's largest global market. I actually started my career at ABB, so they're a massive engineering company based out of Switzerland. Okay, so we have all of these positions that are coming online, and the natural reaction is, well, people aren't going to want to work manual labor, you know, building cell phones manually with very detail-oriented or producing garments or things like that, because that's it's like sweatshop labor, and Americans are above that. That's kind of like the narrative that's been going around. And I would say a couple of things. First is, when you are struggling to get a job and there are jobs to be had, beggars cannot be choosers. If it's in a bad economy and things are tight, you know, people are going to have to do jobs that they don't want to do. I mean, the Amazon warehouse down the street from me is completely full of cars in the parking lot, and they're always hiring. And those jobs are notoriously, at the warehouses, are notoriously not very pleasant positions to work, but nonetheless, they pay relatively well, they've got good benefits, and you can move up pretty quickly. But in addition to that, I think we can expect to see the factories that are coming online are going to be much more high-tech than we probably have seen in the past. Now, there's a really interesting video about what smart factory is. Deloitte has basically created this possible smart factory of the future, and this is likely what we're going to start seeing as far as technology in these plants. So I would expect to see future plants to look somewhat like this. So let's just play a little of this clip, and we'll kind of get some reactions to it.
We've shown you the renderings, and now we're backing up the hype. The Smart Factory is on. It's here, and we're ready to show you right now. 60,000 square feet of advanced manufacturing technology you can touch. Not a theoretical pie-in-the-sky idea, not some showcasey thing. Tech and capabilities to transform the way you do business today. Through custom simulations of smart factory applications, you can test, explore, and learn from the latest innovations in manufacturing. Factory and network optimization, quality sensing and detection, workforce and warehouse efficiency, energy management, and more is happening here. And you can watch it all play out through an end-to-end industrial scale production line, a fully connected, cyber-protected tech stack, and the factory's operations command center.
Now, before we get further into this video, as you can see, a lot of these positions that would normally have been done by a bunch of people, probably writing in on their notebooks and in Excel spreadsheets, are going to be replaced by a much more automated, probably AI-driven system. Does it mean that we're going to get all of these jobs back, that they're all going to be like that? They're all, you know, the like quote unquote lower level positions are going to be eliminated? No, I still think that there's going to be a place for manual labor type of roles. But also a lot of the plant engineering is going to become much more high tech. So if I'm somebody that's trying to get into a manufacturing career, this is where I would be focusing on smart manufacturing. Is there a way that I can start to brand myself to be a major player in smart manufacturing for my company and for my industry? Because these are the technologies that employers are likely going to start demanding in the future. And so when I talk about staying current with your skill set, this is the stuff that I would be paying attention to.
Hey, Spot, can you go check on your friends?
So now that we've gone through all that, the question is, should we expect there to be a manufacturing boom in the United States? Now, there are some people who say that there's no possible way, it would take way too long to get scaled up. There's not going to be a base of skilled people ready to take those jobs. And alternatively, there's another side that says, yeah, they're coming back in earnest. Companies are making these investments. The press releases are there. You can go check these corporate websites. So I'm going to go with the side of the companies who are actually putting their money where their mouth is. I'm thinking that there's going to be more manufacturing returning to the United States. It just may take a little bit of time. The second thing that I want to point out here, though, is it is likely not going to be in the same shape, form, and fashion that we were used to before these plants left. Automation and AI are going to be a much bigger thing. And I would expect to see, as companies increasingly move back to the United States and build brand new greenfields, they are going to opt for more smart AI technology-driven facilities. And so that means that the average hourly worker may not be able to walk back into a plant, pick up a screwdriver, and get to work. You may have to consider reskilling if you want to thrive in this new manufacturing economy. And if I'm somebody that is trying to rebrand myself, or I am just coming out of college and I'm getting a career started, it's time to think strategically here. What skills can you get related to where manufacturing is going to be moving tomorrow? Because that's going to give you the differentiated skill sets that can make you unique and highly in demand with employers. So if you're ready to take your career to the next level and potentially take advantage of the manufacturing boom that may be coming our way, now's the time to start preparing. The good news is I'm here to assist you with that. I've got a website called lifeafterlayoff.com, which is loaded with insider tips and tricks, all from a recruiting perspective. And I share my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training courses. The first one being career strategy. And this is particularly important if you're just about to graduate and join the working world. But it also can apply to people who are trying to transition from one career type to another, or you're just feeling rudderless in your career and you haven't been able to get any traction toward a certain goal. The first one's called the Ultimate Career Blueprint, which breaks down a successful career from day one all the way to retirement and gives you specific strategies on how to move through your career with the highest degree of conviction and authority. It's like chess, teaching you the rules of the game here, and it's foundational knowledge that everybody should have. How to get promoted, how to move through organizations, how to play the political game without getting too stinky, and how to use your career to your advantage so that you can get to your aspirational goals and then hopefully exit the workplace on your own terms and not because of an untimely layoff. And once you have your career strategy set, then you move on to the tools like resume writing through like Resume Rocketfuel, for example, or job search through the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp, or networking and LinkedIn, which is unlocking LinkedIn. And all of these courses are designed to work together. So if you're just getting started in your career, or you're ready to pivot into something else, or you just want to unlock your career potential, I highly encourage you to go and check those out. I also offer some limited private one-on-one coaching. If you really want to have a more in-depth discussion about your specific circumstance, you can reach me through my website for that as well. So what are your thoughts? Do you think manufacturing is going to come back in earnest? And is it a boom that you want to take advantage of yourself? Leave a comment and let me know. Anyway, like always, appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.